Hey, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to go together with the Jeep A904. This is the same transmission you saw in the teardown inspection video if you watched that. So before we get into the build particulars, I want to cover a couple of very important things you need to know about these Jeep A904s that make them a little bit different and unique relative to non-Jeep A904s. So, and if you don't know these things, you're not aware, at least you know they catch you by surprise, could create some complications for you when it comes to getting parts. Alright, so the first thing I'll mention is the output shaft support. So in 89 he's changed to a 6-bolt design, and the 6-bolt parts are readily available, the supports, but the previous 4-bolt designs, which are, basically 87 and back, are not available either from Chrysler or anywhere in the aftermarket as far as I know. So I got lucky. I went on eBay after I did that teardown inspection and looked for rear supports and was able to find 3 new old stock, basically virgin supports that had never been used, and bought all 3 of them. So I don't know of any supplier or any manufacturer that is making these right now. At least all of my part suppliers, both here in town as well as online, do not have these as regularly stocked items. So if you need to replace yours, which is, in an overwhelming majority of these transmissions, they need to be replaced because of all the wear, you're going to need to scrounge for one, whether it be a good used one, maybe, your hard part supplier has a couple of them on the shelf that are in good shape, or you need to find some new old stock, or just, ones that are available in places like eBay that, are kind of hit and miss, or, just right place at right time kind of deal. So just be aware of that. And like I said, to my knowledge, I don't know of anyone that's making these, on a, in a production sense that you can just go and order whenever you need one. So be aware of that. The second thing is the roller bearing that goes on the output shaft. I had mentioned in the end of the teardown video that I had ordered a new one, but I completely forgot when I was, when I was mentioning that these Jeep A904 roller bearings are different than pretty much any other roller bearing that would otherwise go in the output shaft of these transmissions. So right here you have a groove. Alright, normally there's a snap ring here that goes and engages and retains the roller bearing on the output shaft, but with these there is no snap ring. So if you look at the extension housing, alright, you see on the bottom of the 4x4 extension housing there is no access point, there's no panel. Like here you see a new access panel gasket that would come in the kit. Alright, that's not applicable for these. So the bearing is going to go in this pocket right here. And it's basically a slip fit. And I mentioned that it was a press fit, but it's not. It's actually a slip fit, and it goes in this direction. So this bearing is in good shape. I'm going to reuse it. After I'm done with this overview, I'm going to stick it in transmission fluid and let it sit there until I'm ready to actually install it. But just know that these bearings, these particular bearings, are not readily available, as far as I know, anywhere in the aftermarket. And obviously they've been long since out of production from Chrysler. So if you are working on one of these Jeep A904s and you need to replace this bearing, more than likely you're going to be scrounging for a good used one, or maybe some new old stock on eBay. That's really the only place that I could think of that may, have one available for you. So just keep that in mind. Most of the time these bearings are in reusable shape. Okay, here's the part number. It's MRC207SG13. Alright, and like I said, it takes an O-ring. The O-ring's in good shape, so we're just going to reuse it. Should not be a problem at all, but if you're not in a position where the bearing is serviceable and you need to replace it, just know that you may be scrounging for one. Okay, the third thing that I'll touch on that is different with the Jeep A904s relative to all of the non-Jeep 904s is going to be the kickdown band apply servo piston. So here is a typical A904 piston here in my left hand, and here is the Jeep 904 piston in my right hand. Alright, very obvious difference between the inboard diameters, right? This is going to be much smaller than this. This is, I think, 1.998, and this is like 1.375 or something like that. So this is unique and organic to the Jeep transmissions. So the bore is different, they're not interchangeable, and most importantly, if you're trying to do something high performance, all of the billet servos and servo cover combinations that feature a dual sealing ring setup that are available in the aftermarket for this particular servo piston are not compatible with the Jeep transmissions. There's, to my knowledge, okay, and if you know something different, please correct me and maybe provide a link to where I can find one. To my knowledge, there are no equivalent billet pistons for performance applications in the aftermarket or being produced or made or available by anyone for the Jeep 904s for that kick-down band servo piston. Alright, so if you need to replace this piston for whatever reason, it's damaged or worn out or whatever, you're going to need to find a good used piston and go back with that one. So very important. I just, like I said, wanted to touch on those things up front so that you're aware of them if you weren't already. Now, if you've used to rebuilding Jeep 904s, this is common knowledge for you. But for those that are not, for someone that's just maybe getting into these transmissions and has never worked on a Jeep A904 before, this is the kind of information you want to have before you start working on your project, so that you can kind of prepare and de-risk your part supply chain up front. All right, let me just real quick provide an overview of the build in general. This is going into a dedicated off-road vehicle, tube chassis kind of deal. It's going to use a GM 3.9 engine that this is going to mate to, and it's going to be used for rock crawling, trail riding, boulder use, general off-road type stuff in the desert. We're going to be installing Coke Racing, reverse pattern manual valve bodies, see over there. These come ready to install out of the box. The only thing you really need to do is transfer the parking rod assembly from your old valve body to this one, and that's basically it. All right, as far as everything else is concerned from an upgrades perspective, we're going to install a Sonex billet 1-2 accumulator piston, as well as low reverse servo kit. So you have the plug and the servo piston, or cover I should say, itself, and then you're going to reuse your factory springs, and Sonex gives you a new snap ring and an O-ring to go with it. All right, clutch module wise, we're going to install Alto high energy frictions in both clutches, the front clutch and the rear clutch. All right, new flex band, also high energy, and a low reverse band that's also high energy. Ordered a complete bushing kit. We have a full thrust washer kit, as well as a complete sealing ring kit for all A904s from 1960, in addition to the sealing rings that came in the main paper and rubber kit, like I said, because we have the sealing rings that go on the servo piston for second gear, so I don't think that they are in the main paper and rubber kit. Alright, going to be installing a new forward clutch drum piston diaphragm, return plate. So I always like to replace these. I don't generally ever reuse the pre-existing plates. I mean, they're 40, 50 plus years old, so transmissions that take them, the Chryslers and the Fords, I always purchase new ones. They're like a few bucks, and it's just a good way to de-risk that part of the build. We did end up acquiring a good used rear planet. As I mentioned, in the teardown video, I didn't like the condition of the one that came out of here, so we got a good used one. All the pinion gears are in good shape. It's got a lot less vertical travel in all the pinions, so appears to be within spec, and just generally speaking is good to go. We have a new roller assembly kit, so the rollers and the springs will go back together with that. But other than that, it's a pretty straightforward build. We don't need to do too many things here from a high performance perspective. There's not going to be any real RPMs to speak of. It's going to be mostly used off-road. Very low, kind of deliberate crawling over rocks and boulders and other obstacles and things like that. So it's just going to go back together more or less how it came apart. Going to be reusing the pump gears. If you watched the teardown video, we went and did a clearance check, make sure that everything about the gears and the body were in spec, and that the pump was generally in good shape. No concerns there. The governor is going to go back on, but it's going to be non-functioning. It's again reverse pattern, so full manual valve body. So no need for governor function, but we are going to put it back on. All right. Let me go ahead and reposition the camera. We'll get started. What I'll basically do is assemble the pump, the two drums, the servo assemblies, and then what we'll do is a assembly of the gear train on the bench so that we can revalidate our travel check or our in play for the gear train. Make sure it's still within that 5 to 48,000 specification. If not, we'll make adjustments as we need to. We have a complete thrust washer kit in case we have to tighten it up, but my intention here is to reuse all the thrust washers that came out of the transmission. They're all in perfect shape. There's nothing wrong with them. So, if we need to dig into that, thrust washer kit, we will, but I don't think we'll need to. Other than that, all the basic stuff, new lip seals, new sealing rings, O-rings, gaskets, all the usual things that go into a transmission rebuild will be going into this one. Alright, we're going to start with the pump. So I had to create a little bit of a workspace here. First thing we want to do is pull out the bushings. I'm going to just start with the stator. So you have a bushing way down here. Okay, see it's kind of hard to see, but in your bushing kits you're going to have two replacement bushings. Okay, they're basically the same bushing except one's wider. We're going to use the wide bushing. Okay, so narrow bushing we can put aside for now. Alright, so I'm going to use a blind hole puller to get at that bushing. And these blind hole pullers are readily available on Amazon, eBay, wherever tools or auto parts stores may have them, wherever that kind of stuff is sold. Alright, let me go grab the slide hammer and then we'll yank it out. So there's not many bushings in this transmission. There's two in the pump assembly, one here and then one in the body. Bushing in the direct drum, two bushings in the sun gear, and a bushing in the ring gear or forward hub. And if you have a two-wheel drive transmission, there'll be a bushing in the extension housing. And that's basically it. So, makes it real easy that way compared to some other transmissions that have loads of bushings. Okay, I just want to double check, make sure I'm truly on this thing. These bushing kits are readily available in the aftermarket, so no fears or concerns there from a supply chain perspective, like there are with some of these other parts I mentioned earlier. All right, so out comes the bushing, and as you can see, it's of the narrow variety. So you can kind of see the recess where the bushing lives, so to speak. In fact, let me get a flashlight. Give you a little bit better view down there. Okay. Alright, that's where the bushing is going to go. Alright, let's go to the press and install it. Like any other bushing, just get it as square as you possibly can. Had to straighten it out and center it. And it's kind of halfway down. Alright, and now it's fully seated. Alright, take it back to the bench, check it on the input shaft, and then we'll move on from there. Alright, looks good. That screeching you heard was just simply the dry sealing ring. And it's making a little bit of noise here, so we put assembly lube on that when we replace them, so they won't go back and dry. Real quick, before I forget to mention it, you see 3 balls here, like this here on the very base of the stator pump cover area. That indicates a lock-up pump cover, or pump cover designed to go with a lock-up application for the torque converter. Okay, 1 ball or 2 balls is indicative of a non-lockup design. And with the shaft, same kind of deal. If you see a pilot here like this at the end, then you know you're working with an input shaft designed for a lockup converter with a clutch. Otherwise, you'd have uninterrupted splines all the way to the very tip, just like a TH350. All right, next we deal with the pump body. So with the bushing, you're going to press it out, this way, and then when you go to install it, you're going to install it in this direction, and then we're going to stake the 2 locations here. So back to the press. Like all bushings, just make sure that the surface itself is nice and clean and dry. And then get yourself something to act as a bushing stop for the new bushing. That's too long. All right, let's go stake it and then we'll proceed with the pump buildup. All right, now we're gonna stake the bushing and then we'll go ahead and install the front pump seal and then put the pump back together. All right, so here are the staking locations. Just take a blunt chisel and stake it. Pretty straightforward deal. Main thing is you don't want to accidentally smack the casting itself. Okay, I'll probably work this over just a little bit more and then call it good. I have the wrong seal on the bench for whatever reason, or had that seal, it's extra. This is the correct seal. Alright, so just get good sized bushing driver and get the seal square as you can in the bore. Alright. Alright, ready to put the pump together. So I got the pump O-ring on here. So let's take that off. And grab our little pump stand and alignment tool. And then just lube up your pocket. Get your bushing and your seal. Make sure you get all around the inner diameter there. Again, you can't really use too much lube, you can only use too little. And do our driven gear and then drop in the drive gear. So drive gear goes in this orientation with these oil grooves facing you or facing up. If you install this, or if you're not sure, how it should go, try to install it onto the converter hub. If you install it like this, backwards, in other words, where this is facing down in this orientation relative to up, then you're not going to be able to install it. It's not going to go on. It won't slide on. So if ever you're in doubt, just grab the converter, and whichever way that goes on, the drive gear, then that's the way that you need to orient it in the pump. Okay, so what I like to do is I look for the two widely spaced bowl holes, and then I look for the same here on the body, and then I'll just carefully slide and mate the cover with the body, lining up all your bowl holes. So these bolts are all the same and they get 15 foot-pounds. The book technically calls for a spec of 175 inch-pounds, but I just do 15 foot-pounds and that's fine. Alright, so 6 bolts in total. And just make sure that they're all threaded. 1/2 inch. I need to align them first. Jumping the gun. So I get a lot of questions about this alignment tool, and basically the story with this thing is that I purchased it on eBay about 10 years ago, and I do not have any clue as to, you know, who the seller was, or, you know, whether it was, you know, a retailer, or whether it was just somebody, you know, selling it used. I mean, I think I bought it new. In fact, I'm almost positive it was new, but it was a long time ago, about 9-10 years ago. So I have since looked for another one just like this, and I have not been able to find one. And looking on eBay, looking on Amazon, and no luck. So, I mean, you can use a hose clamp. You know, they have other purpose-built alignment tools. I mean, they're all over the net. You know, you'll be able to find something, just maybe not this exact one. Bad angle. Just go all the way around, make sure you got them all. That's the main thing. All right. I'll get this out of the way, and then I'm gonna bring the case over, and what we'll do is we'll drop the whole assembly into the case. Make sure that it's good to go. All right, let me raise you up. So you got your two bolt hole locations real close together, roughly the tack lock positions. So that's where you want to line it up. And then when you go to install it, you're going to have all your feed ports and suction and pressure at the 6 o'clock position, or roughly the 6 o'clock position. All right. So that's perfect. Goes right to the deck surface there in the case. No issues. They can be a little stubborn coming out though. So you just want to lift it straight out. Let's get this out of the way. Alright, now we'll retrieve our pump O-ring. Alright, just put it on. Nothing to it. So these are the old sealing rings, so let's swap those out. Just interlock style, nothing fancy. And you just want to be careful of journal surfaces. You don't want to scratch up either of these surfaces by accident. And then to put them on, you don't need any snap ring pliers. I just like to take them off with the pliers. It's easier. Interlock. Okay, make sure they're good to go. I'm gonna grab our washer. I mean, I probably should have put the washer on first. Wasn't thinking. Okay, so here's the bottom side. These are fiber washers, so if it's, you know, damaged in any way, shape, or form, you know, don't hesitate to swap it out. You just gotta maneuver it over the ceiling rings. And that's why I should have put this on first. It's like I made more work for myself than was necessary. Alright. This washer and the washer that goes on the top of the forward drum, they're both the same. I mean, same outer diameter, inner diameter, and thickness, 61 thousandths of an inch. Okay, so the pump is done. So what we want to do is, we want to do one last check before we move on. So if you have it, grab you a checking tool. This is going to be Miller tool C3756. And my gloves got ripped up, so I'm going barehanded. Alright, just slide it in. And then turn the drive gear. Go a couple circuits, you know, a couple revolutions. And make sure that it spins nice and free. And that there's no binding or nothing getting caught up, nothing unusual, right? Because you want to make sure that when converter goes on, you know, pumps in, cases all together, you don't want to find out then that there's a problem. Alright, now we'll move to the forward drum. We'll build that up, build up the direct drum, and then move to the servos and gear train. Alright, just like any other drum, lube up your sealing surfaces. Just use plenty of lube. Get it all nice and covered. And then you're going to grab your lip seals. Okay, so these are the old lip seals. We're going to take them off. One thing you want to make note, the forward drum piston is going to have wider lip seals than the direct piston. Alright, so you see the difference. Here's the direct, here's forward. So direct piston's only going to take this one lip seal and then the other lip seals in the drum itself. There's no harm in leaving the lip seals on through cleaning and to assembly. You know, like I mentioned in a lot of my other videos. If you're not familiar with a particular transmission, it's just good practice so that you can immediately compare the lip seals from the old the old lip seals that come off the piston to the new lip seals that come out of the packaging. So if there's some, you know, transmissions where like the lip seals are very, very similar and it can be, you know, somewhat tricky to tell them apart, then, you know, that's kind of where having the old lip seals in place can help you out, you know, with identifying which lip seals go where. Okay, make sure this bleeder ball is functioning, make sure it moves freely in its little, you know, capsule location. Okay, there's different type of you know, lip seal tools. There's this kind that I'm using, and then there is like kind of a wire type. I don't have any of those, but they're available too. And then they have the kind that sometimes come in the kits. They're like plastic, and you just kind of fold them, and they get in between the lip seal and the sealing surface. They work okay, but I prefer the blade kind, over all of them. They're just easiest to work with. Alright, so as I mentioned, your diaphragm, and then your snap ring. Okay, these aren't overly difficult to get in there. The main thing is you want to make sure that it's 100% engaged underneath each of these lugs. Go all the way around. And then another good idea is to have the ends underneath of a lug. So I'm going to try to do that. Alright, I think that's good. I don't know how critical this is, to be perfectly honest with you. I've built several of these transmissions before I even paid attention to something like that. It's just, once I noticed it, I figured, well, maybe I should just do it like that going forward. But if you don't do it, I wouldn't sweat it, to be honest. Okay, here's your backing, or your apply plate rather. So high energy frictions. Your steel module. So you got 3 flat steels, 4 frictions, your apply plate, and your backing plate for this clutch. Alright, so just make note of which side goes which. I mean, again, I don't think that's super critical, but if you want to be consistent to where, it went in the same way it came out, all that good stuff. Alright, seems like it's a little tight, but once we put air into it, start working it, then it might loosen up. Alright, so what we're now going to do is replace the 3 sealing rings. So we have a variety of sealing rings here on the bench. And so if you have a kit that you get from either TransStar or Transparts Warehouse or whatever, they're going to have a little note inside the sealing ring kit, and it's going to give you some information about the changes in the design of these sealing rings. So basically what they're saying is they've moved to a butt cut design. Okay, that replaced the interlock design or hook design for those metal sealing rings. Now on this transmission we have a scarf cut ring, and then we have a hook design ring here for the input shaft for the 2 small rings. And then on the large diameter ring, that's going to be a hook or interlock style. And that's what we have here. Alright, so let's go ahead and replace our rings. And this is another reason why I like to have all the old sealing rings or lip seals still installed, because you never know, especially if you're not used to working on a transmission. Like, I don't do these all that often, so if there's design changes or anything that you need to know from like a difference in terms of parts, what they look like or how they are, so to speak, you want to be able to have the old parts so that you can readily compare in the event there's any uncertainty. And these want to be stubborn. spread it. Like, the main thing is I don't want to break it because I want to be able to directly compare this ceiling ring with all the ceiling rings we have here on the bench, so I could pick the one that best fits. And man, it does not want to come out, or come off rather. All right, so there's your 2 small diameter ceiling rings, and then we'll grab the large diameter ring. I'm really clumsy with these things. I just get at it with my fingers. There we go. Overcomplicating that. Overcomplicating. Alright, so we know we have a good match. So the best way to match these up is to interlock them. Actually, this is not a match, is it? Nope. Let's take a look and see what we have. So this is what we want to match up. So it looks like we have a match here. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and look at the smaller diameter rings and see what is the correct ring that we should be using. Alright, so go ahead and we'll interlock the ring. And here we have a butt cut ring. Oop. Okay, this butt cut ring looks like it should work. Butt cut. Of course I break it. There's scarf cut rings as well. So we got an extra one, thankfully. Or do we? Alright, so looks like we have some interlock rings. Alright, so we have some plastic interlock rings that should work. And we'll know if we have a problem when we go to air check. Now if we want to reuse or use a scarf cut ring, we could do that. Now I'm looking at these scarf cut rings and none of them are as thick as this one. So we'll just use these 2 plastic rings. These are similar to 4L80E center support ceiling rings, and I think the pumps also take these same kind of rings. Alright, very caveman, very clumsy, very sloppy there, breaking a ceiling ring. It unfortunately sometimes happens, but you know, it's never a good thing, especially if you don't have extras. So again, a perfect example of why you kind of want to build in some redundancy when it comes to your parts, because you don't want to be in a position where you break something and the build gets delayed and you got to go out and spend more money for more parts. All right, that feels pretty good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build up the front clutch, and then we'll go ahead and we'll start doing air checks and clearance measurements for both the forward and the direct clutch. Alright, so first things first, we have a bushing we got to replace. So these bushings are always worn. In the 727s, they had a very narrow bushing initially, and then they transitioned to a much wider bushing, which is, you know, what you want to go with. You can retro the later design parts as long as you retro the drum, the front pump, and the rear clutch, you know, just as a service pack, into an earlier design, as long as all other compatibility considerations are accounted for. So it is something you can do, especially for performance, and you have a very early case. It's 1971 is when they made this transition to the wider bushing, so it's always a good idea to use that whenever you can. Alright, let's go to the press so that we can remove and reinstall this bushing, and then we'll proceed with the buildup of the drum. Decided to pound it out on the floor instead. Alright, let's check it. So let me get a little bit better lighting conditions. Alright, looks good to me. Alright, back to the bench. Alright, got a little bit better lighting conditions, so we'll take another gander at the bushing to make sure it's, you know, how we want it. You know, if it's not, if it's like cockeyed, then all you really need to do is simply straighten it out. So let's get the pump, and then we want to check how it mates. This actually is tight. Let's see. It's snug, but there's no resistance in turning, or at least no, you know, concerning resistance. There's not like a bind up, and it's got an oil groove here, so oil will you know, get in there between the journal surface and the bushing to lubricate it. So try one more time just to, you know, be doubly sure that this is what we want and that we're good with it. Okay, turns nice and smooth. If you have a bushing that's a little troublesome, what you could do is take a soft hammer, and, you know, as the workpiece is on whatever other part that it's mated to, you just go around, spin it, smack it on the side, spin it, and smack it on the side. Nice and easy. Okay, you don't need to be crazy. You don't need to like act as if you want to punch it into next week. You just need to tap it. A couple smart taps, go all the way around, and that should handle the problem for you. Okay, check sealing rings, check that washer, everything looks good. So pump back on forward drum, and then now we're in good position to build up the front clutch. Alright, so we have our lip seal here on the piston, and then you want to check here on the inner diameter of the piston, make sure that you cannot feel any scoring. Alright, you don't want to be able to feel anything. If you see it, like what you see here, wear patterns, I mean, that's perfectly fine as long as you can't feel anything. If you feel something and it's very slight, 800 grit sandpaper and then polishing it off with like 1200 should straighten it out. If not, just get another piston. Oh, you know what? Let's grab this seal here inside the drum. We don't want this in here. And these inner lip seals, I mean, they're really in there. So again, a little bit premature in my application of assembly lube, but no big deal. That's what it looks like. So we have the new seal, okay, and it faces down. The lip faces, into the base of the drum. You want to be careful with these because it's very easy to either overstretch them or to twist them on the way in. Okay, you want to be real careful about getting them over these, little cutouts and then past the snap ring groove. Just take your time, kind of wind it all the way down and let it seat into position in its own groove. Alright, and then just check it all the way around. Take a pick. Make sure that you can get up underneath that lip and that it's not twisted. Okay. Just go all the way around. See if I can get it a little bit closer to the camera. You just want to make sure that it's not all twisted up in there. Alright, looks good to me. I mean, if you do twist it, you'll know it when you try to put the piston in. It'll either bind up on you, or when it air checks, or when you do your air check, it won't air check and it won't pass. It'll, you hear a lot of hissing coming out of the drum from behind that piston. Okay, so 727s and then, your 518s, 618s, 48REs and such, they have issues with the lip seal on the drum being a little bit too, too narrow, not wide enough. And so all the kits come with a wider, updated lip seal there, and that's what you want to install. Now, there's no dual feeding the direct clutch with these transmissions. I mean, you just have your, one main cavity. So you have the seal here and you have the seal here. There's not like two chambers with a seal and a drum that's partitioning it off like a, you know, TH350 or other GM transmission, 400s, 480Es, 204Rs and such. So so this you're just going to work, kind of do the best you can to get it into the sealing surface, get the lip seals past that sealing surface. Now just be real careful, don't force anything, and it'll go in. I mean, you really don't need the lip seal tool at all. Alright, so you got your big giant spring. Notice the locking bosses. You want to make sure your snap ring is engaged such that, you know, it's got all four locking bosses making contact with it so that it's not going to come out. So obviously we need to go to the press to do this, and foot press is not going to be sufficient, at least my foot press is not sufficient, maybe yours is. But unless you have a really, really beefy, big foot press, you're going to need either a shop press or maybe a really big, you know, arbor press. So, all right, let's go to the press and install the snap ring. All right, we have drum in the press, and once again, DT47867 is going to be used to compress everything so that we can get to that snap ring and install it. Looks like I'm partially disengaged. Okay. Again, a little sloppy, but it's in there. This lighting's horrible, so let's go back to the bench and then we'll take a look at it. If we need to, we'll adjust it. It's getting late in the day, and unfortunately the way my shop's oriented, you know, it's facing due west, so you'll have sunlight, you know, just basically coming in almost head on and washing out everything in the front half of the shop. So, and that's where my press is. Alright, so the direct pack is going to consist of 4 frictions, 4 steels, and then your backing plate. So we're putting a new set of steels everywhere in the transmission. So I should say, well, both clutches. You want to make sure that for whatever reason, You just want to double check, make sure that this steel is not, sitting underneath the base of that lug. I mean, it's not something that as long as you're using stock parts that are in spec, it's not something you'll have to really worry about. But you always want to double check that, because if God forbid you use something that it's a little thinner, or you try to machine the piston, and you end up with a situation where one of those steels falls underneath the base of those lugs, then you're gonna have a no apply situation in third gear. So you don't want that. And same with reverse. So this drum's on in third and reverse. So your snap ring is going to be waved. So clearance is going to be between 67 and 134 thousandths for a 4-clutch stack up. And that's for the A904s. The 727s are a little different. I'll just put a chart so you can have all the clearances available for all 727s and 904s for the front clutch. Alright, so it's done. Let me go ahead and fire up the compressor, and then we'll do some air checks and measure clearances. Alright, got the dial indicator set up. So here's going to be our forward clutch feed, aka rear clutch, and then here is our direct clutch feed, aka front clutch. So we know we're a little tight, so I want to see what kind of clearance that this is going to show us when we apply air. And then we'll go from there based on what we find. So you put too much air, the drum will want to jump up and down on you. Alright, so we're at 15th thou. Let's hit it one more time. 15/16 thousandths of an inch. That is pretty tight, and that's kind of typical of what you might see. Now, the snap rings are actually selective in this drum, and we have a 75 thousandths snap ring. I think the range is like 75 to 77, or maybe 78 thou, and then I believe that there's like a 58 to 60 thousandths of an inch snap ring. So I'm gonna have to come up with one of them if I want to keep my 32 to 55 thou clearance. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the clearance tends to open up a little bit once you put the transmission back into the vehicle and the clutch starts working for real. But it's not going to open up by 15 thousandths, so we need to do something here. Now, the steels and the frictions are all the same thickness as the ones that came out of here. So I want to say they're like 60 thousandths, and let me go ahead and actually measure them. Alright, so we'll measure the snap ring, and then we'll measure the steels and the frictions so that you can see. Oops. Alright, so we're like at 75 thousandths exactly. There's a pressure plate and the backing plate. This looks like 2 and 15, so 2.015. And here's a friction disc. It's going to be 62 thou. And then the steels are also going to be in that 62. Looks like this one's going to be 65, 66 thousandths range. So same thicknesses as the steels and the clutches that came out of this transmission initially, but we are a little tight. So what I'm going to do is I'll dig around and see. I'm almost positive I don't have another snap ring, a thinner one in stock, but I'll take a look just to be sure. And more than likely, I'm going to have to get one ordered. So I'll just put this back together for now, just so that these frictions and steels aren't, sitting on the bench. And then we'll be scrounging for a different snap ring. I may get another 5/1000ths out of this clutch, but the main concern when you're running the forward clutch pack too tight is that when you're in neutral, it may want to move forward when you're sitting in neutral, so or park. And that's why it's so important to check that bleeder ball, because if you are on the tight side and that bleeder ball is not working correctly, then again you'll want to, the thing will want to move forward in neutral and in park. Alright, so here's our direct clutch. So we have a lot more leeway here. The clearance is, I think, 67 to 134. And here I look like I'm a little on the high side, or at least it just looks like I have quite a lot of clearance. Alright, so direct clutch is going to be right here. So 85 is actually right in the middle of where we'd want to be. With 92 thou, well, let's see, this thing's not returning to 0. Okay, 85, 90 thousandths, that's fine. So the direct clutch is fine, but we need to figure out a solution for the forward clutch, aka rear clutch. Alright, gonna put this stuff back on the bench, and then what we're gonna do is assemble the two pistons for low reverse and intermediate, and then we'll move to the gear train after that. Alright, I have the forward clutch set back up in the pump here, and we're gonna take one last reading, but there is one key difference here, and that is I swapped the new diaphragm plate with the original one, and when I did that and put the clutch back in, I mean, it's even noticeable by eye. There's a lot more space in that pack than there was with the new one in there. So I'm gonna go ahead and put some air, and then I gotta hold this drum because it's gonna want to dance around. And basically, we're shooting for at least 32 thousandths worth of clearance. All right, had 30 before we went buck wild. That's 32, 32, alright, I'm going to call this good. We're at 32, maybe 33 thousandths, and like I said, we'll gain about an additional anywhere from 1 to 4 thou once it goes back in the vehicle, but this is a lot better than where we were previously, because there, if we installed that clutch the way it was with only 14 or 15 thousandths or 16 thou worth of clearance, we ran the risk of dragging when we were in park and neutral, or the vehicle may want to move forward under certain circumstances, and possibly also give us a partial tie-up when in reverse, so we don't want that. Alright, we're good to go, so now we're going to move on to servos. Okay, so we'll start with the second gear servo piston cover assembly. Alright, so as I mentioned in the outset, the 904s that came out of the Jeeps had a different apply piston than did non-Jeep 904s, so want to keep that in mind. That makes sourcing performance parts, when it comes to the servo, a little trickier, in that I'm not aware of anyone that makes a performance servo. So the stock servo is kind of what we have available, and that appears to be the only option for now. It is wider here at the inboard side. And that's nice because the problem with these servos in general is that they tend to want to cock sideways. And when they do, this sealing ring wears out, prematurely. And then of course you have delayed engagements, slipping, the band eventually burns up. So here's our scarf cut sealing ring. So that's going to be for obviously the inboard side, and then we have one for the outboard side. Now when I air checked these two sealing rings, when I air checked the whole servo apply, it actually had good strong apply. So, and the only reason I mention that is that in the chance that we have to reuse them, I guess I'd be okay with it, but it is certainly not my preference. Alright, so this takes an O-ring here. And then just lube up your bore. And that's just going to go in like this. Just make sure it's past the snap ring, and then you have your snap ring. That is a pretty simple deal. That's it. Okay, now let's go and see if we can match up our sealing rings with new ones. I have a whole bunch of scarf cut rings, some interlock rings, okay, so that's going to be suitable for a typical servo, but not so much for this one. This one's pretty close. Let's see if it'll fit in the groove. We may have a winner. Okay, I am not going to throw these sealing rings out just yet. Then I'll put that back in our little bin there. And now let's see if we can match up the bottom sealing ring. I want to make sure that the scarf cut ends are mated as they should be. This one is thinner than this one. I have a butt cut. This is thicker. It actually looks like a governor sealing ring. It's definitely an adventure trying to source parts for these transmissions, even simple things like sealing rings. You gotta kind of go through some trial and error. I'm not crazy about this one here because it's thinner. I don't like that. Alright, let's see. Now here's a good example of how not to install scarf cut ring. Okay, you see how they're kind of opposed to each other? You want them to look like this. Okay, here's the sealing ring that came off of it. Again, we'll put that back, and I'm gonna go with the steel ring on the inboard side, and then the scarf cut ring on the outside, or outboard side, I should say. And then, you know, if we need to adjust, we can. Alright, so second gear servo is preliminarily assembled. So then you would have your main spring, and then you would have your ring here, or I'm sorry, your cover. So we have a butt cut sealing ring. So let's see if we can reach in and grab an equivalent. I really don't like to break these, especially like I said with these. I want to preserve them if I can. Alright, there we go. So that's not the correct size. Try an interlock ring. Okay, the interlock ring is too small. The butt cut ring is too big. And I think we may have found a winner. I'm going to go in this side. Alright, we should be good. I'm going to lubricate the pin. And then it's basically just going to be like this. Okay. I'm going to just set it there for now. Alright, we're now ready for the rear servo. So I have the Sonic servo and plug along with the factory servo and plug. And I want to show you one thing that I actually didn't even realize or notice until after I had put the Sonic's set up all together, you know, ground off the little tip that you have to do with these 904s, and actually installed it into the case. And that's when I realized that there was a key difference between these two plugs, the Sonic's plug here on the left and the factory plug here on the right. And I filmed this whole process, but I'm not going to show it because I don't want to create any potential confusion for folks that are new to these transmissions. So here's the difference. Again, this is another idiosyncrasy with the Jeep 904s. Here's the Sonic's plug, and here's the factory plug. Alright? Notice the difference in the depth of the two plugs for the adjustment screw. Now, this plug is set up for basically every other Chrysler longitudinal 3-speed or 4-speed transmission. So the 904s, the 727s, and the A500/518, 618, 48 RE series of transmissions. Okay? Because it uses a band lever that has a plunger that goes into this pocket right here. On the Jeep A904s, there is no such plunger. Okay? So notice how shallow this indentation is here, this recess. So Obviously the screw is a finite length, so when I started to put the screw in, that's when it actually dawned on me and said, wait a minute, this screw's going to bottom out, you know, literally go through the band lever before it'll ever reach 72 inch-pounds. So kind of kicking myself a little bit, had to undo everything I did, you know, take the whole assembly out, take it apart, and, you know, kind of start from square one, at least with the low reverse servo. Luckily, that didn't require me to do anything else that I've already done, you know, installing the band and the drum and all that stuff in the case. But still, it is kind of a kicking myself in the rear end moment, but I wanted to make sure that I highlighted it, called it out here, in case you're new to these transmissions and you purchase one of these Sonics upgrade kits, which will work for every other 518, every other 727, every other 904, and that's what it says on the packaging, and that's true, but it will not work for the Jeep 904/998 transmissions. So what we're going to do is, I'm still going to use the Sonics servo, but I'm not going to use the Sonics plug. So we'll put the factory servo aside, we'll put the Sonics plug aside, and then how it'll go together is with the factory plug, the factory spring, and then the Sonics servo piston, which does fit. It'll spline on. We'll compress the spring, expose the snap ring, install the Sonics snap ring here, which is brand new, and then once that's all done, then we'll put the main spring in, we'll put the spring seat, have our snap ring, and then we'll compress all this so that we can install the snap ring into the case when the time comes. Alright, so got everything else here. So now we'll go to the press and assemble the piston and the spring with the plug, and then we'll proceed. Alright, so that's how it's going to go in the bore. As you can see, some of the green dye or paint or whatever it is worn off on the lip seal because I already installed this thing. Actually, let me take care of this accumulator first. I mean, there's not a whole lot to this. So you have your sealing rings. These are intended to take D-rings on the inboard side, in toward the interior of the piston, and then these must be scarf cut sealing rings. So let's see what's available. This may not be the correct sealing ring. No, I don't think it is. Okay. I believe this is correct. I will double check the instructions. Of course, I'm one of those types that never reads them, so I'll double check, and then if I need to, I'll bring you back and we'll make revisions and give you the correct instruction for that thing. That looks right, but we won't know until I verify. Alright, now on to the gear train. Alright, got all our gear train parts here. We're going to assemble everything on the bench so that we can measure end play or gear train travel. So if you watch the teardown inspection video, I kind of did this as well, so we'll perform the same exercise. The difference being is that we replaced the planet that came out of this transmission with a good used one. So anytime you replace gear train parts, you absolutely want to double check. I mean, this should be part of your assembly procedure anyway, but especially if you replaced anything in the gear train, and that includes thrust washers. So all these thrust washers are the same ones that came out of the transmission. So we have the 2 4-tab washers, the 2 3-tab washers. These are for the front planet, these are for the rear planet. You have your number 4 washer, and then you have your thrust plates for the sun shell. So they're 52 thousandths thick. These 2 washers are 50 thou thick. These are 49 thousandths thick, and this is 120 thousandths thick. None of these are selective, but if you need to replace your thrust washers, there's going to be some variance, a couple thou, 2, 3 thou here and there maybe. So if you're on the tight side or the very loose side, that actually could make a difference. So I always tell people, keep your thrust washers unless they're straight up broken, and start with those, because if they're in good shape like all of these are, there's no reason you can't reuse them. Now if you're on the higher side and you want to tighten it up a little bit, this particular snap ring here is selective. So I actually don't have any other snap rings other than this one, but I think if I recall correctly, I was more or less in the middle of the range that we need to manage to, which is 5 to 48 thousandths. I think I was actually on the tighter side, 18 or 19 thou if I remember correctly. So we're going to go ahead and assemble everything again and see where we're at. Basically, we'll measure with feeler gauges to determine if we are within that specification or not. And if we're not, then I'm purchasing a snap ring kit. So as far as assembly lube affecting the measurement, if you put a whole lot on, you're just gooping it up, then I suppose if you're at the margins, either on the high or low side, it could make a difference. But other than that, I wouldn't worry too much about it. So there's your assembly for your rear onless gear and rear planet. And then we'll do the sun shell. So for the sun shell, the side with the wear faces you. The side that's relatively clean faces the shell. Doesn't matter which side goes, or which plate goes on which side. I just like to keep the wear patterns consistent. That's really about it. So then you got your little crenulated spacer. That just goes like that. And then the large end of the sun gear, large diameter end of the sun gear, is going to be on the inside of the shell. So it'll just basically be like that. Alright, we don't need anything assembly wise for the other side. Just want to make sure that we have that snap ring groove exposed, and we can put this wire style snap ring on. Shouldn't take multiple pairs of snap ring pliers to get this thing on, but I guess I'm not having the best of days right now. Alright, so the last thing we need to do is assemble the front planet. So it's going to take 2 of these thrust washers, each 50 thou. And I'm just going to seat it into the onless gear. And then grab your number 4. The flat is going to face the flat. on the planet's journal, and then your snap ring. Things upside down. It's not strictly speaking orientation specific, but you know, I had the wear showing, you know, right side up or so. Alright, now what we're going to do is go ahead and final assemble the gear train. So we have rear planet, ulna gear, sun shell assembly, and then our front planet. Our snap ring. Okay, the little Babbitt selective washer, the number 3 washer that goes here, does not go behind the snap ring, it goes in front of it, so it's not actually involved in the measurement of the gear train's travel. Alright, so this battery's about to die, so I'm going to change it out before we do our measurement. But right there, that's what you're measuring. Okay, 5 to 48 thou. I mean, I'm in spec, I'm good. But we'll actually get a measurement with the feeler gauge in a few minutes. All right, it's now a few minutes later from my point of view, but instantaneous from yours. So it's like you've traveled ahead through time. So let me grab my feeler gauges, and then we'll go ahead and do a measurement. So let's see where I put them. Alright, there they are. Alright, so here's 5 thousandths. So all you're going to do is just lift up here on the output shaft. And see if you can get that 5 thou feeler gauge in there. We certainly can. Slides right in with plenty of room to spare. So if I recall correctly, I think I was at 17, 18, or 19 thousandths, somewhere in there. I filmed that teardown video about 4 days ago from today. So still relatively fresh in my mind. I'm going to try 17 thousandths. Okay, 17 is actually too thick. Let's go 10 thou. Okay, I can't see if the viewfinder's focusing or if the camera's focusing or not, to be honest. Alright, 10 thou is good. So we're between 10 and 17 thousandths. Again, that is right where we would like to be. For higher performance applications, you kind of want to run this right in the middle. In fact, if this was a high performance application, I think we'd be, pretty much perfect, because you want to give enough spacing to allow lube oil to get in all amongst the different parts here. All the planetary pinions, through the thrust washers, your sun shell, your sun gear, and all that good stuff. But you don't want it too sloppy, such that you have a lot of lateral movement in this gear train. Alright, so I'm going to take it apart and install bushings. And the parts are called bushings, the sun gear, and the front hub. And then that'll be it for the gear train. I don't know why the hell I'm having such a difficult time with this. You can leave the sun shell assembly, as it is. You don't need to take it apart just for replacing the bushings. as long as you don't, you know, mess up the sun shell, damage it in any way, shape, or form, it's perfectly fine to leave it on there. So I'm going to just R&R these bushings real quick, and then that'll be pretty much it for sub-assemblies. I lube up the bushing, and then just go ahead and lube up the bottom of the hub, and then carefully fit your planet. Sometimes these bushings will be a little stubborn, but as long as it's spinning free, no binding, just like this, it's fine. So get your number 4 washer and your snap ring. Alright, appears good. Incidentally, I had the wrong driver. So this is the driver that I had to use, as you saw. Alright, now we're going to yank out the bushings and the sun gear, and then that'll be it for the gear train. That, just make note of the depth of each bushing relative to the deck surface or the top of the sun gear, face of the sun gear. I get a glove, was kind of smacking my hand there. And this one seems like it's in there pretty good. Alright, there we go. Alright, no harm done to the gear, the shell, or the hand. But it'd be easier if I took the sun shell off the sun gear, but I'm lazy. I just don't feel like doing it. So, alright, gonna go to the press, and we'll install these two bushings, and then that, like I said, will be it for sub-assemblies for the most part. Our old bushings, our new bushings. These bushings aren't fussy, but you always want to replace them. I mean, you really don't want to just run used bushings unless it's absolutely necessary. I will check it. So we're going to use this platform here, and we're going to seat the face of the sun gear on this platform. This is another Miller tool, Miller MB 990799. And if you watch my other bushing videos, then you've undoubtedly seen it. That went too far. That was a little off center, so I gotta straighten it out. Alright, that looks good. Alright, I'm gonna test these bushings on the output shaft. If they slide on nice and smooth, good to go. If not, then we gotta adjust them. Okay, so the gear train for all intents and purposes is done. So we'll put all these parts into the case individually. We don't, not going to throw it in as an assembly. So what we'll need to do is set up the case, get it like horizontal, and then first things we'll need to do is install the selector shaft seal, and then we will install the rear servo, and then from there the low roller assembly, output shaft support, all that good stuff. Not necessarily in that order. The actual order is selector shaft seal, output shaft support, and then we move inside the case and then start installing the low rollers. Get the rollers and the springs in their respective locations in the cam, and then from there we begin with the band, the assembly, the servo, and then work our way to the front.